All right, the embargo has lifted and we can start to jump through some of the new units, campaigns, and all sorts of fun stuff that are coming with the Hunter and the Beast DLC. So across the next couple days, what I'm going to be doing are releasing some overviews of the campaigns, going over the new units that are being added to both the Empire and the Lizardmen in their own respective videos. So in this video, we're going to dive deep on each of the new units and the regiments of renown added with the Empire. We'll be starting with Marcus Wolfheart, go through all the new units, and then end on the Huntsman General. So here are all the units arrayed before you. Let's jump into a little bit about Marcus Wolfheart himself. The Lord of Hats, Marcus Wolfheart himself, and we all know how the Total War community is quite fond of hats. So let's take a look at this bad boy. Ooh, I just flipped him around too. So to start off with, as far as his points cost go, we're looking at a total of 1749, so 1,749 with him completely loaded out with all of his abilities. Base, Marcus Wolfheart is only 1,000 points, and that's actually quite good, considering that he is a legendary lord with quite a lot of missile damage. If you take a look at him, he's got 556 missile damage, with 280 of it being AP and 120 of it being a whopping bonus versus large. And as a whole, I think this character is going to be very competitive in a lot of situations depending on which army you're against. He's amazing at sniping out lords. Like, I mean, if you're talking about any lord on a mount and you're playing against the Empire, it's going to force that lord off of their mount, because Marcus is going to be able to pluck them out of the sky like that. He has a number of abilities too that really help him in really putting that pressure towards the enemy. For starters, and this is going to be relevant to one of his abilities, he does have a pretty significant range at 180. Now, one of his abilities here is fleet-footed. Now that gives him a further 70-meter increase on the range of his abilities, making it 250 for any one of his activatables here. So that's quite nice. In addition, it gives him an 18% speed increase, so we can kind of juke and move away from things quite quickly, which is good because he does also have move whilst firing, which is a very strong advantage. He does have Vanguard if you want to do any kind of crazy deployment in the backline. It's worth pointing out that Marcus Wolfheart is actually better at being a sniper character than a Lithanar, which I don't know how I feel. It makes me feel weird in the stomach about, but it's worth bringing up. In addition, he also has immunopsychology, and of course he's going to have encourage because you know who he is. He has a 15% missile resistance as well, so he's a little bit harder to return snipe from, say, a Waystalker or, again, a Lithanar. Now, taking a look at his abilities, these are the things that really kind of clinch it. Sure, he can do a lot of damage every shot on a 7-second or so interval. I think it's 7.2, 7.5 is his recycle, 7.2 or is his reload time. But he has 3 decimating abilities. For one, he gets this one, Hunter's Snare. Now, we all know the glory days of using Net of Amontok to really get a lot of value in a 1-2 punch for Empire back in Total War Warhammer 1. This kind of brings that back to the fore in a lot of different ways, because you can use this guy in conjunction with a Light Wizard to just completely lock down hard-to-hit big models. Well, not hard to hit, but a lot hard-hitting big models, such as your Dread Saurians to be added, Kolek Sun Eater, any of the Dread Sphinxes, the Necro Sphinxes, any of the larger beasts you want to get down fast and have them knock out to your front line. You can use Hunter's Snare to keep them locked down for 11 seconds. Now remember, this does get an additional range from the fleet-footed ability, so it makes it quite strong when you're trying to lock something down before it gets to you quickly. So keep that in mind as you kind of factor into your choices when you want to use Hunter's Snare. Now, in addition, you'll notice that when it does go down, it looks just like Prey of Anathrama, like that golden net that drops down rather than the white one of Net of Amontok. So you can clearly see which ones are on the battlefield, so you can kind of get that synergy with the Net of Amontok. Now, in addition, you also get Amber Bow. Now, this does do a lot of damage to single targets. I mean, it does say good against large combatants and strong versus single combatants, but it does have a bit of a splash, and it does do damage very similar to what we get with the Amber Wizards. He even says here, carved from Drakvald oak and enchanted by a powerful Amber Wizard, its shots are guided directly into the hearts of Wolfheart's enemies. It's very similar to a shot from Amber's Spear. So it does have those 3 kind of cascading shots that do damage. So it can actually do a lot of damage to a unit if you were to shoot down the length of it. So keep that in mind, that it isn't solely used on large targets. You can still actually do quite a bit of damage to a really focused high value unit. Now, really the coup de grace, the best ability in Wolfheart's repertoire is his focused shot ability. This thing can do so much damage. It does AP, it does magic damage, it just does a lot. But the biggest thing here is, take a look at this first portion of the effects. Scaled projectile damage against combatants with missing health. The more health that your opponent is missing, the more damage it will do. Now keep in mind here, it only can be used towards single entities, versus this can be used, the amber bow can be used towards any type of enemy. So you do have to kind of pick and choose what you're shooting at when you use focus shot. It can really only be used on those single entity targets. So it's going to be really there for your high value monstrous targets and or lords and heroes. So keep that in mind. But that does wrap up our mighty Marcus Wolfheart. Let's jump into the very bottom of the line here and go into some archers. Now the archers are a new unit to the Empire roster. They are in the Empire army list from the tabletop, and we already kind of know that. But they do kind of build a little redundancy into the game. So let's take a look at what makes them so strong or so different from their crossbow counterparts. Now, the big thing about archers is that if you're looking at campaign, this is both the archers and the deathjacks, so it's the Regiment Renown version. You can build them in the base building of the Empire. You don't need to go through a huge barracks line to get to them. They're activatable from turn 1, and that is a pretty strong bonus. Crossbowmen need the level 2 of the barracks, so that does make for a little bit of a difference when it comes to campaign. As far as multiplayer goes, though, these guys are only 350 points, with the Regiment of Renown being 550. That's the deathjacks there. So at 350 points, they actually bring quite a bit to the table. They do have a small range at 120, and their missile damage is pretty good though at 22. It's not huge or amazing, but for 350 points, you can field a lot of these guys and get a lot of shots down range for a pretty inexpensive unit here. Typically when you're going through building your army in multiplayer, what's 700 points when it comes to factoring 2 of these guys in to just kind of get some additional range fire? It's kind of a nice little addition to the roster that you don't have to jump all the way up to crossbowmen, which I recall are around 450 points. So this does save you a little bit here in making for a pretty inexpensive unit. I think they actually might be 500 as I further talk. But their overall melee attack and weapon and melee defense is nothing substantial, so you do not want to get these guys in combat. They will lose quite quickly. In addition, their leadership is quite low, and so is their armor. So you want these guys in a back line, very well padded from the front line, or you want these guys in the very front to just get some initial shots on and absorb a charge. Like if that's the way you want to use them, that might be the best call. Either on a flank, well guarded, or in the front, just kind of get some shots and get killed, because you just have 350 extra points to kind of sink somewhere. They can be used in conjunction with with the Huntsman General, and we'll talk about that a little bit towards the end of this video, but there are some synergies you can use with the archers and other range units. But let's talk a little bit about the deathjacks. So the Regiment Renown, you do get the typical kind of kit here, right? So you do get an additional 10 leadership, 5 melee attack, 5 melee defense, and you also get 6 more missile damage, and that is quite nice. In addition to that, though, you get some nice abilities with the deathjack. Now, you also get Vanguard, which is a great kit for these guys, because again, they're only 550 points, and they have snipe and stalk. So for 550 points, you can get a unit that can kind of wait in the back line next to your opponent and have them start to snipe out artillery pieces, start harassing backline units such as any kind of mortis engine effect abilities or anything like that you want to really focus down. Because they have snipe, they can stay a good distance away and stay hidden. Remember that stalk and snipe do work in conjunction. Stalk keeps your units from being revealed and hidden on the battlefield, and snipe allows you to continue to shoot and stay hidden while firing. So it's kind of a nice little caveat there. So this is the new unit for the archers and their respective Regiment of Renown. Let's jump up to the beefier version of them in the Huntsmen. Now the Huntsmen are another interesting addition to the Empire roster. The Regiment of Renown versions look exactly like the painting of Lord Fauntleroy, so they've got that going for them. But let's take a look at the Huntsmen as a whole. Now, they do have a further increase on their range, right? Now, when we compare them to the archers themselves, they get 40 more range, they get a little bit more ammunition, but they're hanging around at the exact same missile damage. But what else do the Huntsmen have going for them? Well, they have a significant, well, not a significant, but they have a substantial amount of bonus versus large. Now, this is only 8 with a 9.9 second reload. How does that compare to, say, a halberdier or a spearman? Well, a spearman has a bonus versus large of 15, and a halberdier has a bonus versus large of 16. The Demogryph Knights with halberds have a bonus versus large of 25. This is to put into a frame of perspective for you that while these guys don't have a high amount of bonus versus large, it's because they are a range unit, and they will be able to constantly shoot while a melee unit will otherwise be engaged and being wiped out from other units from all different angles. So while you do have to guard your huntsmen, they're a great way to get pretty inexpensive bonus versus large on the field, because these guys only cost 650 points. That's 300 points more than your archer unit. In addition to that, you get stock, fire whilst moving, which is pretty huge, and vanguard deployment. They do only have 36 speed, so a skink unit that runs at 46 speed will outrun them, so you have to be mindful of that. And still, their melee attack is only 16, followed by a 17 melee defense and 25 armor, with only 5 more leadership than your base archer. So these guys are not meant to be in combat, but they can at least run and shoot while moving. So if you're looking to displace them, as something charges into your back line, these are a great unit that can move away from stuff that has started to compromise you, and then get a better firing angle, while at least still pouring on bonus versus large damage, if you know you're going to be against a lot of units that have, a lot of armies that have large units. This can be advantageous when you're playing against lizardmen, especially, which, I mean, are chock full of monsters and dinosaurs now. But it also can be really strong when you're playing against high elves, when you know you might be dealing with Alariel and nobles on both steeds and or mounts. Or if you're dealing with Bretonia and their Air Force cav. Not to mention, of course, Vampire Counts and Vampire Coast with any number of flying beasts that they can bring. So the Huntsmen are a very cheap anti-large variant that you can bring to the table and actually have a large volume of them, because again, they're only 650 points. Now let's jump over to the White Wolves, which are the Regiment of Renown version of the Huntsmen. And these guys kind of mix things up a lot more. So they are 900 points. So you are looking at a 250 point increase on these guys. And I believe that they come at, the Huntsmen themselves come at the tier 3 barracks for campaign. Now the White Wolves bring a lot to the table. Take a look at those combat stats. They jump up to 36 melee attack and 32 melee defense. So they actually fight a little bit better than swordsmen. So compare that to, say, your Free Company Militia. You get another unit that is a missile unit, that does have some decent combat abilities, and can actually threaten your opponent if they decide to charge into your missile infantry. So keep that in mind when you're choosing the White Wolves, because I think as an anti-large unit, they bring a little bit more to the table. They do have 5 more missile damage. That isn't a further increase on the bonus versus large of the unit, so it's still at 8. But with the further increase to their combat stats, a nice 10 bonus to their leadership at 65, which isn't too awesome, but still it's a little bit better, and a slight increase to the weapon strength, they can at least hold their own. And that'll be nice because they have a lot of benefits. They can also encourage in a nice aura around them. They have, of course, the Vanguard, Fire Whilst Moving, and Stock, but they're also immune to psychology. So if this unit gets flanked or attacked in the rear, it can at least return damage, as long as it's like a Hounds unit and not something that's going to completely just crumple them with some sort of crippling charge. But at the same time, they're going to be immune to psychology. So if you get anything that's got fear that's typically jumping through the back line, Harpies, Hounds, Chaos Warhounds of the sort, Dire Wolves, you can at least mitigate their fear-causing effects with the White Wolf Huntsman. And again, with their melee abilities, they can at least hold their own for a little bit longer. As a whole, I think the White Wolves are probably my favorite new Regiment of Renown that's added to the Empire as far as multiplayer Regiments of Renown, barring, of course, the Black Lion, which we're about to jump into here. Let's jump on over to the War Wagons. Here they are in all their ridiculous glory. You've got all 3 variants of the War Wagons. You have your typical Handgunner War Wagon, your Mortar War Wagon, and then your Black Lions War Wagon. As far as cost goes, let's take a look at this. These individuals here are 950 points, just your standard variant War Wagon. As you move into the Mortar variant, you're looking at 1100 points, And then as you look at your Black Lions, your Regiment Renown Hellblaster variant of War Wagons, you're looking at a total of 1,800 points. But what is the difference between these guys and their stationary counterparts? Because there are some differences. I mean, we can talk all day about combat stats, but who really cares? These things, for the most part, are kind of makeshift chariots, so that is worth bringing up for all three of these variants. They can charge in and do chariot damage and then charge out while also doing damage from the back of their wagon itself. So do consider that when you're using them, you can cycle charge them. But when we take a look at the range values of all these guys, 130 on the handgunners, 340 on the mortars, and 250 on the Hellblasters. You're looking at about 11% decrease on the range for these two, the handgunners and the mortars, and about a 15% reduction on range for the Hellblasters. So that's what you're pretty much compromising. The ability to move quickly with all of these tools of war with a reduction to their range. The missile damage is the same. You don't get any more missile damage on any of the War Wagon variants than you do on their stationary counterparts, but you have a substantial increase in ammunition at the cost of range and mobility, of course. Now, I mean, obviously these guys can fire whilst moving because they're in a wagon, and the mortar itself and the Hellblaster both have a siege attacker. These things are all obviously worth noting. Now, in addition to that, each one of these is quite powerful, and it's worth bringing up how strong it can be to have 2 or 3 of these things, especially the War Wagons that are just handgunners. I mean, you are spending a premium on these guys. Like, for instance, the mortar variant is almost 2 times the cost of a mortar. A mortar is 650 points, and the War Wagon mortar is 1,100. So you're just shy of that 2 times cost. But again, increased mobility is huge. You don't have to worry about these things getting pinned down in combat as much, because the fact that they are chariots, they can path through things a lot easier if you have anything that is not cavalry trying to shut them down. So if you get threatened by spearmen, halberdiers, anything of that type of variant, you can at least path through them a lot easier than you could with dealing with anything jumping on your stationary artillery pieces. For the most part, if you don't have a spearman unit or something that can immediately relieve any pressure on them, you're going to lose that unit. So the nice thing about these War Wagons is you can keep that mobility up, and you get a nice big firing arc. You can see here as we take a look, you can see that they've got that straight firing arc for these two, and the 360 firing arc for the War Wagons with handgunners. As a whole, I think they're really strong. And honestly, the Black Lions, the War Wagon Hellblaster, is the strongest unit added to the Empire in my humble anecdotal experience. Having played them multiple times, every time you take them, especially against a faction that does have a lot of heavily armored targets that are hard to crack open, the Black Lions just pour on so much damage. The mortar variant, I think, is a little more situational. I wouldn't want to use it in, say, armies that are not as tightly packed together, but I think that the handgunner War Wagon we're going to see a lot of in competitive play, and I think that the Black Lions will see a lot of play in competitive play as well, just because of the amount of AP damage they can spit out and then displace as fast as they can. I mean, at 250 range, you don't have the benefit of the 290 you get from a stationary Hellblaster, but at the same time, you can get close, get a couple volleys out, and then retreat back to your line and do a lot of damage. That's the nicest thing about these guys, is they can do a lot of harrying damage in the opening portions of the game. Some weaknesses though, they do have a very low speed at 50. Most cav, if not all, can catch up to them. Even heavier cav, like Demogryph Knights, can catch them well before they get out of range. So you have to keep that in mind. I mean, Skinks, again, have 46 speed. They're 4 speed slower than your War Wagons. So while these things can't, shuck and jive out of a protracted combat with a faster opponent, they can push through smaller units, and they can do a lot of harassing in the early portions of the game. And the last unit on our list is the Huntsman General. His hat's quite not as cool, nor his coat near as cool as Marcus Wolfheart, but he does have some cool abilities. So let us take a look at him here. He does not have the AP value that Marcus Wolfheart has. He does have quite a significant amount of anti-large, and he still has 160 missile damage. So do factor that when you're taking a look at this character. Marcus does have a little bit more, but at the same time, this guy has other abilities. Now, as far as his total cost, he's 1,416, so 16 points, fully loaded. And I don't think most people will take him fully loaded. If you were to strip him completely down with no abilities and no items, he'd be 750 points. That is not the cheapest Empire General. The cheapest Empire General is a Archlector at 550, but who would take an Archlector with no abilities? Still, let us take a look at the Huntsman General. Some of his abilities are pretty substantial. Now, his kit for the most part is going to look very similar to Marcus. Missile Resistance, Encourage, Vanguard, Fire Rules Moving, and Stock. Now, here's where things get a little bit different. One of his abilities is, one of his items is Glittering Scales, which is actual an 8th edition item in the army book itself. And this reduces the melee attack by 5 of everything in a 40-meter radius around the Huntsman General. This is interesting. It can be nice to be used in conjunction with a strong front line. You have this character kind of holding right behind that front line and getting a lot of damage in, but at 40 meters, he's not really meant to be up close and personal. So this might be a little bit wasted depending on how you're outloading or using your Huntsman General. In addition, he has Crown of Command, which does make him or anyone else in a 100-meter radius, that's the target range here, unbreakable. So this is very similar to Throg's not Crown of Command. I can't remember off the top of my head, but the ability to just make someone unbreakable very quickly is quite nice. Now, in addition here, we also have the 3 abilities that are quite nice. Now, we saw the Snare, the Amber Shot, and then the Focus Shot of the Huntsman, Marcus Wolfheart, but the Huntsman General's abilities are a bit different. He gets one called Oil Flask. Now, this will give a 50% flame weakness, and it reduces the speed of anyone it hits by 48%. Now, it does only have a 70-meter range, which is quite dangerous because his range is 180, but it works in conjunction very well with some other abilities. So let's see how you can really kind of pop the synergy on this. So let's say you've got, let's just say a feral mammoth charging down range at you. You use Oil Flask, the mammoth is now slowed. You pop Hail of Fire, so anyone in 40 meters around the Huntsman General, including him himself, for 22 seconds, causes fire damage, and gets a plus 30 to their reload skill. So you're going to get a much faster rate of fire if you have him embedded in a lot of Huntsmen, which already have anti-large. Now they're going to be doing fire damage. In addition, they're going to do 50% more fire damage because of the flame weakness from Oil Flask. Now, your Feral Mammoth is closing in. You've already popped your 2 abilities here with Hail of Fire and with the Oil Flask. Now you're going to go for the Arrow of Akshi and do an additional chunk of fire damage, which will also explode. So if you have this on a set unit, like let's say you're playing against Dark Elves, and you have the Blades of the Blood Queen, which are doing their Guardian passive ability and giving that physical resistance to a unit next to them. Well, you can pop all 3 of these in conjunction, especially the Arrow of Akshi, to really do a lot of damage to that sole unit that is guarding the hero and or lord it's next to. So you don't need to just use this on large targets. It can be used on a unit itself. So you get that kind of different stance with the Huntsman General versus Marcus. Marcus is definitely focused at doing single target damage and bursting things down fast. The Huntsman General is more focused on supporting your army. When you take a look at stuff like his Glittering Scales, he's giving a benefit to your army. Unbreakable, he's going to be making it so things are now unbreakable. Now with Oil Flask and the Hail of Fire, he's going to be benefiting everyone around him by making them do fire damage and reducing the flame weakness of anything around him. Now, to the target you've chosen this. Now you can even go further with this and 1-2 wombo combo this with a Flame Wizard who has cast Fireball on something as well that has Oil Flask, which will further reduce their further increase their weakness to flame. So you have got a lot of options with the Huntsman General. He can really be used in a combo mentality, but you have to be mindful of those combos. You can't just simply willy-nilly use these items and hope that you kind of get like a good score off, a good kill off of this. You have to be mindful of what's going out and where the recharge is on all of your abilities. But as a whole, I think that a lot of the ability or the units added with the Empire are a lot of fun. They bring a lot of different things to the table that I wouldn't have really thought were weaknesses of the Empire. I've always thought that the Empire had very strong range capabilities. But with adding these kind of Vanguard stock snipe units with the Huntsman and the archers and the regiments of renown, it adds a lot of kind of utility and low cost range units to an already top end heavy Empire army. Any of the nicer or more worthwhile units of Empire cost quite a bit. Well, this is a way to get some good range damage into the Empire roster without really breaking the bank. In addition, the war wagons add a lot of flexibility to all of your artillery pieces in the army, and both Marcus and the Huntsman General are amazing lords that have very specific use cases that are a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video here today and it gave you a good idea of how these new units can be incorporated into your competitive play, or how you can use them in campaign to get the most value out of each and every unit. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Be on the lookout for the Lizardmen version of this video here coming out on Sunday. That'll be just around the corner. But as always, have a good one and take care.